From Hollywood, it's Out of My Mind. I'm Jay Douglas, and in episode 17, it's a brand new Out of My Mind short story. We're going from using your computer to print words to using it to print things, while giving your children or grandchildren an advantage they won't get in school. And then there's the chocolate. It's curiously essential information for baby boomers like you who are relentlessly curious about everything. If you're not a baby boomer, you can still listen to the program. All you have to do is dig out your grandparents' old wine bottle cutter and make up a set of 8 glasses in time for Thanksgiving dinner. We're adding a touch of glass to the show as episode 17 of Out of My Mind begins with a journey into a new dimension. If your idea of 3D printing is tchotchkes for sale at carts in the mall, you'll want to take a few minutes and listen to this story. Judging 3D printing from mall trinkets is like judging an elephant from its tail. 3D printing is making some dramatic changes in the way ordinary and often extraordinary products are made. But what caught my attention was a much different change, one that has nothing to do with making things and everything to do with changing the lives of our children and grandchildren. More on that in a moment. First, let's take a look at what 3D printing is.
Let's say you're making something out of wood. You're going to take a log, cut up the lumber, and, get rid of waste and end up with pieces you want. You're subtracting from that wood to make a part and then, add pieces together to make a product.
That's Tom Hazard. He and his wife Tracy are designers, innovators, and leaders in the use of 3D printing to solve design problems. As Tom said, old-fashioned manufacturing chips away at what you don't want. With 3D printing, it's more like making a layer cake. Each layer is made not from batter, but from heated plastic, resin, or metal powder. A 3D printer forms the material into a layer which has its own special properties such as color, strength, and shape. By printing layers, one on top of the other, you can create the equivalent of a mass-produced, one-of-a-kind product. The terms sound contradictory, but with 3D printing, they're not.
The company that makes these sort of invisible braces that you snap onto your teeth, they've got a factory of just a huge number of these machines printing Invisalign braces every single day.
And it's the perfect solution for them because each brace has to be different.
That's Tracy Hazard. Besides braces, she and Tom have a long list of products that have been revolutionized by 3D printing. Need a hearing aid?
Now, they're doing actual 3D scanning of your ear, taking that 3D model and printing it on demand using 3D printing, and that's transformed that industry completely.
And here's one more example that is, quite literally, touching.
There was a blind pregnant woman who had, they have these 3D sonograms now to see what your baby's going to be. Of course, a blind person can't see it, but they took that 3D scan of the fetus in the womb and then 3D printed it and gave it to her, and she could hold it and touch it the way that, blind people see by touch. And it was just an amazing experience that she never, ever could have had until her child was born.
3D printing has other advantages, too. There's less waste, for example. And it's possible to make products that can't be made in the traditional way.
Think about a faucet. Typically, that would be cast out of a material like brass and then plated. And there would be one cavity, one path by which the water flows through that whole faucet, because the manufacturing processes are limited to doing that in a lost wax or a sand casting. But with additive manufacturing, 3D printing, they can print the metal, and there's a faucet. Instead of one channel where the water goes through, one of these has 6, and another one I think has 10 or 12.
And one of the things that they're finding is that in some cases this can be water saving because by the way that you're doing it, you're actually not pressing through a huge amount of force of water. You can actually flow it differently and save water. So these are the advances that they're looking at.
But Tom and Tracy are passionate about another use for 3D printing. One that's not about what products the technology can make, but what future it can make for our children and grandchildren. It's something they discovered when their daughter caught the 3D printing bug.
She's learning how to manipulate three-dimensional objects in the computer and create things that she prints on our 3D printer. And while she's learning how to 3D print, she's learning geometry and math. and all these more advanced subjects that she probably wouldn't get until a few more years down the road in her education.
Did I mention their daughter is 6?
The other thing that she's learning is successful failure, which I don't think we teach enough to our students in school. We don't teach them the ability that you can fail and then redo it, and you've learned something, and that's important. But that's exactly the way 3D printing is, because a lot of times it fails on the machine. It doesn't look good. You saw it in the computer and it looked good, but then you print it out and it doesn't. And so the idea that you just go back in, fix your model, and do it again, that iterative process is so important to teaching kids how to continue to build successful growth.
If parents or grandparents are so inclined to help give their kids, try and give them an edge and have this experience early on, there are some very inexpensive printers that are geared towards students that are incredibly safe and designed to be safe. We did a review on one recently called the Polar 3D printer. It is made specifically for students, and it's very inexpensive. It's like $600 for students or educational institutions, and for a real 3D printer that can do anything that much more expensive 3D printers can do.
You hear about STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, but add art in there. Getting that skill set as a, kind of part of their basic education.
It's a foundational education now that's happening.
We're going to get them to think in 3 dimensions from the beginning, and I can't even imagine the things that they're going to come up with.
If everything you've heard so far doesn't convince you that 3D printing deserves the title awe-inspiring technology, there's always the chocolate.
There's also chocolate printers out now that are extruding chocolate into whatever forms you again create in the computer, and then you can actually print that, and it's really opening up a wonderful range of options.
Chocolate Easter bunnies, that was only the beginning. Tom and Tracy Hazard are designers, innovators, and hosts of WTFFF, a podcast devoted to 3D printing. They've shared more information about 3D printing, along with links to some of their podcast episodes, and I've put it all in the show notes. Go to outofmymindpodcast.com, click on episode 17, and follow the link to show notes. On YouTube, click on the Read the Show Notes banner that will appear in a few moments. And speaking of YouTube, that's where you'll find an episode extra about using 3D printing in your business. Go to Out of My Mind Podcast on YouTube.com, click on Playlists, and then on Extras. And that makes for a sweet ending to episode 17 of Out of My Mind. We'll have a short story for you every week from now until the end of 2015. And next week, we're going to combine 2 stories that I should have put together the first time they were posted. Peter Desberg will help you overcome that fear of public speaking, and Dr. Ann Utterback will give you tips for getting your voice across once you do get behind the lectern. That's in episode 18, next Saturday at 8 a.m. Eastern. I'm looking forward to talking with you then. I'm Jay Douglas. Out of My Mind is produced by Penny Summers and is a production of the Theater of Your Mind Incorporated, Hollywood, California.